And I don't get angry very often. In fact, some of my friends think, what's wrong with you? Shouldn't you be angry? But when I do get angry and I get a bee under my bonnet, it's hard for me to let it go. And right now I'm at the stage of anger because she's hurting higher education in general.
Have you ever had someone steal something that you worked really hard on? I've had that happen to me. What if they used something you created in a way that didn't respect your work or your efforts in that work? I'm sure that's happened to many of you out there. That actually happened to Dr. Carol Swain, and her work was plagiarized by none other than Dr. Claudine Gay, the president of Harvard. And I'm sure many of you have seen all the news reports out there. You've probably seen me at Harvard with Sean Hannity's show, out there talking to students and just stunned, right, by the answers that I was being given from some of these students that were supposed to be at America's most prestigious and highest academic university of learning. It's stunning what I witnessed. And I think it's stunning what happened to Dr. Carol Swain. In a way, Dr. Gay is actually the perfect representative of our education system in America. And she and others like Liz McGill have exposed themselves for what they really are. But in a way, they've exposed themselves. They've also exposed the universities and the failure of these universities to adequately teach and properly teach our children and our future leaders. Her placement, Dr. Gay's placement as president of Harvard, just proves that strong moral values and disciplined scholarship are no longer valued by our academia. That's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They've just proven that. Only moral ambiguity and diversity training are rewarded in this new regime that is backed up and supported wholeheartedly by President Biden's regime and administration. On today's show, I have the scholar whose work was not properly credited in Dr. Gay's writing. You are not going to want to miss this. Her response, Dr. Carol Swain's response to Dr. Gay, exclusively here. She is a longtime professor of law and politics, and Dr. Swain is a great patriot. I cannot wait to share with you what she has to say about the current state of education in America. You don't want to miss this, and especially if you have children. Hey, folks, but first I want to thank HelloFresh. HelloFresh, thank you so much for being a sponsor of the Sara Carter Show. You get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients with seasonal recipes delivered right to your front doorstep. That means no trips, right, to the grocery store. You and your family, your children can cook together right at home, the most delicious recipes. And guess what? You don't have to be thinking about, what am I going to cook tonight? What am I going to cook tonight? You already have it at your front door with, by the way, fresh ingredients, potatoes, parsnips, carrots, all kinds of ingredients and seasonings that could go into your food. I mean, I had some amazing pork tacos the other night. They were absolutely delicious. And guess what? HelloFresh is America's number one meal kit, a number one meal kit. Go to HelloFresh.com/Sara Carter Free, HelloFresh.com/Sara Carter Free, and use code Sara Carter Free for free breakfast for life. Get that, SARACARTERFREE, Sara Carter Free for free breakfast for life. One breakfast item per box while your subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life at HelloFresh.com/Sara Carter Free with code Sara Carter Free, SARACARTERFREE. HelloFresh, America's number one meal kit. I'm so grateful to have Dr. Carol M. Swain on the Sara Carter Show. You're a senior fellow for the Institute for Faith and Culture. You're an award-winning political scientist. You've been cited 3 times by the United States Supreme Court. Doctor, you've authored and edited 11 published books. This is incredible. And I think people really know you now. I mean, I think they knew you before, but everyone kind of knows you now because you have spoken out publicly now against President Claudine Gay of Harvard. And I think just to refresh everybody on what happened here, a few days ago, President of Harvard Dr. Claudine Gay, it was revealed that she plagiarized some of your work in her academic writing. And when Harvard did not remove her, even after she couldn't answer if she was opposed to genocide, as far as like the rules and ethics of Harvard University, it was revealed all of these. This was revealed that she also had plagiarized some of your work. So I want to be able to be very clear so the audience understands that. First of all, Dr. Swain, thank you so much for being a part of the Sara Carter Show.
Thank you. And I would also like the audience to know that I was just one of many people who were plagiarized. There were 2 sections from my prize-winning book, Black Faces, Black Interests, the representation of African Americans in Congress, that were used without attribution. And initially, I wanted to get more information. I wanted to read her work. So on Monday, I pulled some of her articles, and then I became very sad because I was sure she'd be fired. And some of that sadness came from the fact that I was sad for myself and I was sad for her because her work was clearly derivative of my work in Black Faces, Black Interests, because I was the person who was whose work was considered path-breaking and seminal in the area of minority representation in Congress. And so her first major article on a published article, the major one, single authored, was on minority representation in Congress. And she has me in the bibliography, but in the body of the paper, there's nowhere that she cites the major authority. Normally, when you're doing academic research, you will cite the person and you engage that work. You either agree with it, you challenge it, you expand it, but you acknowledge that there was someone else that motivated your research agenda. She does not do
Absolutely.
that. And so in article after article, my work, I feel that she drew on my work. There will be a citation in the bibliography, but traditionally, when there is someone more senior in the area who was considered the trailblazer and you're building on their research, then you do cite them. And it matters because in academia, your reputation depends on how many citations you get. If someone is building a career around ideas that you generated for them and they're not citing you except one time or occasionally twice, then that harms you over the long run because their students will read their work. They won't know that the scholar that didn't cite you use work is derivative.
Well, and it says a lot about a person when they do that. And, and I think, I can understand how you feel. In a much smaller scale, I've had situations like that happen in my own life, and it's so disappointing. And it takes away all of the work and obviously the time that you put into that work and the fact that those ideas kind of flourished from yourself and your own background. You were born into poverty in rural Virginia. You earned 5 degrees and obtained early tenure at Princeton and a full professorship at Vanderbilt in political science. And people cite your work all the time. You are a leader in the field of political science and so much more. So seeing another woman who is, revered, who's sitting in a position of authority at Harvard, and knowing that she did that to you, that's got to be just disappointing on so many levels, because she could have just cited you and expanded on it. And you would have been like, thank you so much. And you would have had that same respect, mutual respect for her. But she kind of robbed that from you.
But Sara, it's so complicated. In some ways, I like to joke and say it's stolen valor, but she didn't do that alone. Other people in political science, her committee members, the people who reviewed her articles, her colleagues, everyone knew about my research. And my contention is that as I became increasingly more conservative, because at the time I wrote Black Faces, Black Interests, I was a Democrat, but I was thinking outside the box. That's why I'd won the 3 national prizes and why the book received so much attention. And it was path breaking. It was the tenure book. And at the time that I was at Princeton in the Ivy League, you had to have path breaking work to be tenured in the Ivy League. And so that was my signature statement. I won the highest prize a political scientist can win, the Woodrow Wilson Prize, which I believe they've renamed. But that was like the Nobel Prize for political scientists. So that work was well known. She was able to advance her career without anyone really saying maybe she should cite or maybe she should have done things differently. So she didn't do that alone. And when I look at her work, one of the things that makes me angry, not just for myself, but for everyone who has worked hard and played by the rules, is that the work she presented for tenure at Stanford University, even if it had not been plagiarized in part, would not normally get you tenure in the Ivy League because it was not path breaking. It was not that significant. And so she was able to parlay research that scholars, not just me, but other scholars have said mediocre research, into tenure at Stanford, full professorship at Harvard, and then she rises from dean of faculty where you're evaluating other people's research, and then to become the president of Harvard. And she is clearly a DEI appointee, but it's even worse than that. If she had been some inner city product, and like me, I come from nothing. I'm going to call myself a mutt. She had the right pedigree, but she went to Phillips Exeter Academy, one of the leading boarding schools in America. She went to Harvard as an undergraduate, won a prize for her senior thesis as well as for her dissertation. And they're making excuses for this lady. They're going to redefine plagiarism just so that they can keep that first ever Black president. It's something that I cannot walk away from. And I've gone through many different stages, not quite the Kubler-Ross stages of grief and dying, but at first I was mildly curious and I thought it could have been an accident. And then when more evidence came out that she was a serial plagiarizer and that maybe, I believe as many as 27 people may have had parts of their work lifted without attribution, I was very sad. I was sad for her and I was sad for myself. And then that sadness the next day gave way to anger. And I don't get angry very often. In fact, some of my friends think, what's wrong with you? Shouldn't you be angry? But when I do get angry and I get a bee under my bonnet, it's hard for me to let it go. And right now I'm at the stage of anger because she's hurting higher education in general. Harvard University, as far as I'm concerned, their reputation was already in the toilet. And so they are going down. But why would they stake their brand on this DEI person and try to redefine plagiarism? And I'm also very offended that there are many scholars at these elite institutions who are saying, oh, yes, well, maybe she borrowed a few sentences, but it's okay. They're saying it's okay. They're giving approval. And I read an article in the American Prospect that was saying that I was the only one that was really saying that it was plagiarism because everyone else said it was okay.
This is what I don't understand. It's so insulting. It should be insulting too to Claudine Gay that they would make up these excuses. That would be embarrassing. If that was me, I would be embarrassed. I would be expected to be held to the exact standards, right? And let's say one or two instances, it's a mistake. She didn't make a reference. I mean, you would think that she would come out and say, Dr. Swain, I want to apologize to you.
I'm not important enough. I'm not important enough, but I can tell you, Sara, that
why is that? Let's talk about that, Dr. Swain,
because social class.
I think you are important enough.
It's
I think
social class. I would say that political science marginalized me as a profession, except I did get invited recently to speak at the American Political Science Association. And there have been political scientists that have been very supportive of me, law professors. But for the most part, I've not had the right ideas. And I would say that I didn't come from the right background. and I have not gotten the same rewards. Claudine Gay is considered a distinguished professor. Her work doesn't even merit tenure, in my opinion, and in the opinion of some other people I've spoken with in the Ivy League. And she's a distinguished professor. In all of my career, I've seen people around me that did work that was not the same quality, was not path breaking, was not original, and academia rewarded them. So academia has its own problem going on.
And its own prejudices.
Well,
and its own prejudices against its own, and I'm not talking about color of skin. I'm talking about just the way people are treated based on what they believe ideologically.
Yeah, viewpoint discrimination is what I believe has hurt me the most, being a Christian and being conservative. Because if I were a Black liberal, it's no telling how far my career would have gone. And I can remember times when people were trying to be helpful to me, and I was quietly told not to share my background, because my background is that, hey, I was a high school dropout, teen mom, started at a community college. I had everything stacked against me, yet I graduated magna cum laude from my 4-year college while working full-time nights and weekends. I have worked my butt off for everything I have achieved, and yet it was never good enough. And then once I became a Christian, once I became conservative, it just eventually I was an embarrassment to some parts of academia. And so it really makes me angry. Pardon?
You're the American dream, Dr. Swain.
They don't care about the American dream. No, they care about elitism.
My mother, that's right. That's right. And I remember my mother saying something to me one time. My mom came from Cuba. After my dad died, she worked in a factory. She cleaned old folks' homes. She did everything she could to help my brother and I have a better life. And, you know, she said to me one time, she said, you know, sometimes I think both parties pretend to have two different paths, but they both sleep in the same bed at the end of the day. And she said, that's why you have to stand up for your values, not based on someone else. And you have all these original thoughts, these ideas, this amazing book that has been honored by so many, and you've been cited from your book 3 times in the U.S. Supreme Court. And yet you have this academia that is so, what I said, prejudice based on ideas against you.
Right.
And what do you say to young women and young men who are struggling with that same? I mean, they're up against that, I think, even more now than ever in these universities, as we've seen examples at Harvard and UPenn and MIT.
Well, I can tell you that things changed once I became openly a conservative. But I have books, not just Black Faces, Black Interests. I have 2 books on immigration that were edited books that were published by Cambridge University Press. And I have a book on white nationalism back in 2002, Cambridge University Press. They nominated it for a Pulitzer Prize. And I have always had original ideas, but even within academia, I was told at times that I should specialize. Like if I'm a congressional scholar, instead of me being all over the place with different ideas and different books and stuff like that, I needed to have a narrower area and focus on that. And that's not how my mind operates. And pilfering from my work started in graduate school. I had one of the professors I worked with charge another professor at Virginia Tech with plagiarism of my work. It was a paper that I presented in a class. At the time, I was highly flattered. I would never have pursued it, but I had to testify before a university committee about what happened in that situation. And there have been other situations where people have done things that were skimming on being unethical related to my research. So it was not just Claudine Gay, but with Claudine Gay, she got caught lifting passages from people's works and not even citing them at all in some cases. And the argument that I'm trying to make is that her whole research area is derivative of an area where I was the path breaker, and I would have expected her to give my work more acknowledgement. And I never noticed it in the past because I was not reading her work. But I had
Right.
always heard that she was the hot shot. She was the new thing, and I was marginalized.
Folks, Allegiance Gold, thank you so much, Allegiance Gold, for being a sponsor of the Sara Carter Show and for making my family more secure, right? Imagine a future where your retirement is protected from the storms of market volatility and erosive forces of inflation, recession, government meddling, and economic uncertainties. And right now, that future can be yours. You can get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you visit protectwithsara.com today. That is protectwithsara.com today. With over 50 years of combined experience, millions of dollars in completed transactions, resulting in thousands of satisfied clients, Allegiance Gold is the most trusted gold IRA firm in the nation. Get up to $5,000 in free silver on a qualifying purchase when you visit protectwithsara.com today, or give them a call at 877-702-SARA. That's 877-702-SARA. Don't wait. Take control of your retirement today. Call 877-702-SARA and speak with one of their experts. They'll answer all of your questions and help you get started on a path to a more secure and prosperous retirement. Time is of the essence. Protect your future with Allegiance Gold. Visit protectwithsara.com. That's protectwithsara.com. Hey folks, I would love for you to hit that subscribe button down below and follow the show on your favorite podcast app. I don't care what app it is that you're listening to. Follow the show, write a review, leave us 5 stars. Believe me, it really does make a difference. And it helps me figure out who I'm going to bring on next to the show. This is about you and me together, right? It really helps us out. Thank you so much. What about diversity, equity, inclusion? Let's talk about that, because I'm thinking about this in the sense of like how our universities have changed, how
Right.
they have taken this narrative and instead of, focusing on real diversity of thought, real diversity of genius, like what we've seen in your work and in others' works, they have narrowed it down to color of skin, and they've really robbed, I believe, our youth and our nation of the dignity that each individual needs based on who they are inside too, right?
I would agree.
And this is like,
universities have become indoctrination centers. And when I started my education, there were conservative professors, there were liberal professors. You were exposed
Yep.
to divergent ideas. And one of the reasons I'm conservative today may have been when I was an undergraduate, I took courses with the professor that all the Black students told me was racist and I should avoid him. For me, that was throwing down the gauntlet. And I signed up for that professor. He was challenging, but he was not racist. I got a B plus in the first class and then A's in every class after that. And I can remember during the time I was an undergraduate that he exposed me to Thomas Sowell, Milton Friedman, Glenn Lowry, and just Edward Banfield, a whole bunch of conservative thought as well as other thought. But I heard ideas that I'd never been exposed to before. And that's how I developed critical thinking skills. And I think that that is what young people are missing out on, and that you cannot learn how to think critically or creatively if you are functioning in an indoctrination center.
absolutely. And I believe that these indoctrination centers, and you say it so well, Dr. Swain, are purposeful, because once you start indoctrinating, then you can really start altering history, right? Like the memory holes. Like I was looking at, I was looking at some articles that have come out recently on polls that they've taken with young people, where a good percentage of young Americans no longer believe that the Holocaust was even real. They're Holocaust deniers.
Well,
And once
you can get a law degree in America without ever studying the Constitution. And that has been the case for a long time. And the roots of all of this is the Marxism. The book that I published in 2001, Black Eye for America, How Critical Race Theory is Burning Down the House, all of these ideas, after the election of Barack Obama, I saw dramatic changes in academia. That's when the microaggressions, the safe spaces, the trigger warnings, the personal pronouns, all of that stuff started being pushed then. And it also started seeping into K through 12 education. That did not just happen after George Floyd's death. It was happening all along. And it is part of a broader agenda. And the more recent book that I published, Claudine Gay could be the poster child for the adversity of diversity, because Claudine Gay is someone that she has nothing to offer but her group identity. And you look at the Biden administration, all of the minorities they tout, the most diverse administration in America's history. But all of a sudden, this administration, the most striking thing about it is that all of this diversity is coming from people who are not qualified for their positions. And it really sets back men, women, gays and lesbians. Everyone is hurt by their definition of diversity.
Well, it is. And it's insulting. I think it's so insulting to do that to a person, to say like, well, I'm going to just lift you up because of the way you look or because of your sex. And it's going to have nothing to do with your qualifications. What does that say about me or about someone else that is, that works really hard and can't get to a spot? They're only going to uplift people that follow the narrative and that fit a box.
They have the right pedigree. They have the right pedigree. And what I have found repeatedly is that racial and ethnic minorities, and I'm sure this probably applies to white people too, they pick based on pedigree, not necessarily based on qualifications. If you look back to Ronald Reagan's administration and Nixon's administration, they had some racial and ethnic minorities, but the people were qualified. And what we find now, starting with Obama, you have more people who are racial and ethnic minorities, but less qualifications.
Why do you think that happened, Dr. Swain? How did that started to shift under the Obama administration? Because I remember I covered the Obama administration, also covered the Bush administration. And I remember even with President Bush, I had a problem. I had a problem when he said, they're doing the jobs that Americans won't do. Right. And I was just like, well, that just doesn't sound right. Even though, I don't think, like anyone, I don't think he meant it that way, but I wasn't sure. I'm like, well, my mom works in a factory and there's some white people working in the factory with her. She might be dark skinned.
He was mouthing talking points. And that was the talking point, is that we needed to flood America with illegal aliens because Americans wouldn't do certain types of jobs. And I had family members that were doing those jobs that were being displaced by the surplus labor. So they've always had their false narratives. And if you look at the elite populations, it doesn't matter whether they're Democrats or Republicans, they're on the same page. And DEI is like affirmative action on steroids. And many people don't realize that affirmative action was never the law of the land, signed by both houses of Congress and passed by both houses of Congress, signed by a president. It was always executive orders, but it gave lip service to the Civil Rights Act and also to the Constitution. And many organizations focused on compliance. They tried to practice the non-discrimination and the outreach. They tried to integrate their workforces, where DEI is very much focused on groups. Instead of integration, it's focused on inclusion, where people come in, they keep their identities, they don't really assimilate, they don't integrate. And during the era when I got my education, equal opportunity, non-discrimination, outreach, that was what was working. And it worked for a lot of us. But then with equity, it's about equal outcomes. And so in an equity type of regime, they bring in people and they sort of guarantee their success. And that's what they're trying to do with Claudine Gay. And it's important that we stand up to what's taking place, because leaving her in position, hurts higher education as a whole, but it also hurts K through 12 education, because young people, as they learn that plagiarism, it depends on who you are, and maybe lifting passages from people's work is not really plagiarism because Harvard says it isn't. It harms everyone, and I think that she should do the right thing. If I were in her situation, I would step down, because I would care about the institution that gave me my opportunities. I'd care about all the people who put their reputations on the line to defend me, and I would care about education generally. And so there's nothing to do but to step down.
First, I want to say thank you so much to Dr. Swain for coming on the Sara Carter Show. I invite you to come back off and on anytime you want, Dr. Swain. It was amazing having you on the show, and it is incredible what you have had to stand up against. Please make sure you are subscribed to the Sara Carter Show here on your favorite podcast app. It really, really does help. Follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on X at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at @SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless our great nation. And God bless the great state of Texas.